would you be gracious enough to introduce yourself to our audience this evening?
Sure, Brother Banks. Thank you for engaging in this conversation that I know will be super dynamic. My name is Brother Bryson Rose. I'm a sexual health educator by background, but I'm currently in the role of Senior Director of Advocacy and Capacity Building at a large nonprofit here in Manhattan, where I ensure that people from historically excluded and marginalized communities have a seat at the table. Tell us a little bit about your background and why sexual and reproductive health is of interest to you.
I am a professor at the University of Maryland Global Campus, where I've been teaching human sexuality since 1993. I wanted to ask you, Brother Rose, as a sexual and reproductive health educator, what is sexual and reproductive health education?
That's a really good question. I'm glad we're going to level set, because there's lots of different competing ideas or competing definitions about what this actually entails. So sexuality and reproductive health education is really medically accurate, culturally responsive, relative, easily accessible information and tools about the ways in which we have bodies, the ways in which we're in relationship to others, including but not limited to things like human biology and reproduction, psychosexual development, generative relationship building and maintenance, right? So things like, how do we decouple if we're gonna, break up, sexual identity, right? And sensuality. And what goes along with that, which I think is really important, particularly in this moment, is talking about reproductive justice. So a great organization called Sister Song defines reproductive justice as the human right to maintain personal bodily autonomy, have children, not have children, and or parent the children we have in safe and sustainable communities, right? That's what sexual and reproductive health education is to me. Now, you're the professor, so you tell me, why is this stuff important and why now?
Sure. There's an urgent need to identify barriers and facilitators of young Black men engaging with sexual and reproductive health care. We know several barriers are lack of health insurance, ideas of masculinity that conflict with social and other issues. We know that stigma related to access to services and lack of knowledge regarding available services and care options are also barriers. Some of the facilitators include knowledge of local health clinics, confidence gained from social support, access to quality health care in one's own community, and trust, of course, in the healthcare system and healthcare providers. We know that young Black men who have the knowledge, access, usually develop very favorable attitudes towards both their sexuality and the sexuality of others. These days, social media platforms such as TikTok, YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram, and Twitter have been proven effective in promoting sexual health interventions and in disseminating accurate reproductive health education. They've also been shown to be useful in health promotion and have been used to track several key indicators, such as the number of comments and posts and the quality of those comments and posts. I think it's important also because young men play a role in informing young women's decisions about contraceptive use and in preventing unintended teen pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections. We know that programming that focuses specifically on male involvement in teen pregnancy prevention and highlight how decisions to have sex and use contraception are made by two consenting adults. And so empowering young boys and men to be accountable to themselves, each other, and the larger Black community are critically important right now. What do you see, Brother Rose, as some of the potential benefits from teaching sexual and reproductive health to young boys and men?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? So I think of it like a life cycle. So we're teaching young boys at the ages of 5 and 6, things like, what is love, right? What are, healthy relationships? How do you build boundaries and talk about consent, right? We can prevent childhood sexual abuse, where young people are able to say, this is an inappropriate touch, or this is an inappropriate thing, right? We can talk about then teaching our young people about their bodies, right? So they can take care of their bodies. They can show their bodies care. They can learn how to they're not disassociated from their bodies. And then we're getting into sort of middle school, we're talking about relationships. What's a healthy relationship? What are boundaries? Particularly in this moment, right? Like I often think about some of the work that I do with young people around how do you draw boundaries on social media? If you're dating someone, do you follow them? Do you not follow them? Right? Then we're talking about preventing STIs, unintended pregnancy, right? Again, talking about preventing sexual harm like sexual assault and rape, because we're teaching about what is consent, but also pleasure, right? We're so afraid of talking about sexual pleasure, and that's such a huge part of how people choose or not choose to engage in sexual behavior. So there's lots of benefits. It teaches young people about the diversity of what it means to be in a relationship with different types of people. It teaches about sexual identity. It teaches about all sorts of things that empower people to just live full lives. And I think that we owe it to young people to give them the tools and information so they can make the best decisions for themselves. But we know this, right? In the field, we know that there's empirical data, there's studies. We've talked about this ad nauseum. Where do we see this work moving forward, right?
Sure. That's a great question. So young Black men ages 18 to 24 are more at risk of contracting sexually transmitted infections as well unintended pregnancies. Therefore, they have a substantially greater need for sexual reproductive health services than other groups. And Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated can revamp our Project Alpha to reflect these current trends and the needs in our communities today. Ultimately, we can partner with other community-based organizations to create more culturally responsive curricula for Black boys and Black men in our communities, our schools, and our universities across the countries. What do you see, Brother Rose, that brothers and the general public can do next?
All of this that we're talking about happens within the context of local and state governments, right? So we know that there is a huge push, depending on where you are, to either have comprehensive sexuality education in schools or to not have it. And it's our job, if we want to see this move forward, because we know the potential benefits, to get involved at that local and state level and advocate for this to be in our schools, so we can teach, equip young people with the tools and skills that they need to live healthy lives. But you also, in the meantime, can support organizations that are doing work in your community. I shouted out Sister Song earlier, but there's Planned Parenthood and there's Advocates for Youth and so many other organizations in your communities that are doing this stuff outside of the schools. And so I think both need to happen at the same time so that people can get the information that they need.
Sounds great. Well, I want to thank you, Brother Rose, for having this conversation with me this evening. Very much appreciate
Absolutely,
your
Brother
time.
Banks. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.